Three times in my life, I tried to walk away from, forget about the things that I had seen that were so out of whack, that were so crazy, that were so wrong. And that's what many people urged me to do. But what inevitably happened every time I tried to walk away from this path that I walked was that everything else in my life would be taken away from me, so that this path was the only thing left. I had no other choice. And anger and resentment do build up, especially when you see and document as much corruption, as much dishonesty, as much illegality, as much murder, as much betrayal as I have from people who pretend to be otherwise. And I reached a point, it was about 1993, when I first became involved or learned of the murder of Marine Colonel Jim Sabo at El Toro Marine Air Station. He was the chief of Air Ops, and he had caught CIA C-130s flying 2,000 and 3,000 kilos of cocaine onto his base, and he was suicided. I crossed my own Rubicon at that point. There was no turning back for me. And I knew that wherever this path was going to go, I had to follow it. In the 80s, because I'd had some skill as a writer, I started freelance writing. I got published a few times. I realized that I could be a writer. I wrote about 109 mysterious deaths or suicides in the U.S. military in a very short period of time, and I found that most of those were connected to covert operations in one way or another. The next real evolution came in 1996 after my confrontation with the CIA director Deutsch, John Deutsch, at Locke High School. I remember standing up saying something like, I am a former Los Angeles police narcotics detective. I worked South Central Los Angeles, and I can tell you, Director Deutsch, emphatically and without equivocation, that the agency has dealt drugs in this country for a long time. And the room exploded. I had been saying that CIA was dealing drugs for 18 years. I mean, I'd been shot at for it. I'd been forced out of LAPD. I'd been trashed. I'd been called crazy.
If in the course of the IG's investigations and Fred Hitz's work, you come across evidence of severely criminal activity, will you tell the American people the truth?
We will bring the people to justice and make them accountable.
Like so often when they promise justice, there isn't any. It was whittled and tweeted down. There were some very mysterious deaths involved. Congressman Julian Dixon was at that meeting, had a very sudden heart attack, which led to the publishing of the first issue of my newsletter in May of 1998, From the Wilderness. I sat down and wrote a few pages out, like 8 pages, I think. I mailed it to 68 names. And over the next 8.5 years, From the Wilderness grew to have as many as 60 members of Congress as subscribers, professors at universities around the world, government officials. One of my first exposés after CIA and drugs was that I proved CNN was absolutely lying in something called the Tailwind Scandal of 1998, where CNN had correctly reported, their producer April Oliver had reported that CIA had used sarin gas in Laos during the Vietnam War, and Henry Kissinger authorized it.
4 different A-1 pilots who dropped the gas.
In spite of what the Pentagon said.
CNN, rolled over. Henry Kissinger called. Oliver was fired. Pat Tillman series that I broke in my newsletter, all 7 parts, that was what broke the Pat Tillman expose that brought down 9 officers or got them disciplined.
Tillman, the government violated its most basic responsibility.
But my economic predictions then, we had it so right.
Problems are several-fold behind the economic crash that is coming that will be nothing like we have ever seen before.
In 2006, we said, get out of debt right now. Check your mortgage carefully, especially if you have an ARM. Get into gold. Reduce debt as much as possible. Stay away from any kind of financing and heavy credit card. We issued a whole series of warnings.
How many people have ever heard of the fact that they're trading pools of mortgage-backed securities, like mutual funds, but it's all mortgages? Those books are as cooked as the books on Enron.
But it was like 11, 12 days after we issued that economic alert, in the middle of running the Tillman series, that our offices were burglarized. All 7 computers smashed, and a whole chain of events took place up there, which actually worked out okay, because I needed to evolve, and I have since then. There was a period after, so many years of deliberate attempts to sabotage my operations, 4 of which we connected in one way or another to the FBI. I published that I had retired. I said officially that I had retired. What I had, and at that point, given the way I felt, that was a pretty honest statement. I didn't know that I would bounce back, or that there was a third or a fourth wind to come inside of me. But that also is the image that I wanted out there, just to take the heat off me, at least until Bush and Cheney got out of the White House, because that's where the heat was coming from.
From them personally? I mean, from their administration, or from the people that ran the CIA, that ran the FBI? Who was that pressure coming from?
I have absolutely no doubt that Richard Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld took an intense personal interest in me and what my newsletter had published for all the years of the Bush administration. That's about as specific as I care to get. There was a guy named von Clausewitz who said that war is a continuation of politics by other means. Politics is a continuation of economics by other means. To understand all of this mess, you need to understand one term. It's a big financial term that's real simple to understand. It's called a derivative. A derivative is any financial instrument which is derived from the inherent value of something else that's tangible. In other words, an ear of corn has value. A barrel of oil has value. If you have a house and a mortgage, that's fine. When you start doing mortgage-backed securities, packaging and bundling, that's called a derivative. As of the start of the collapse, which let's peg at September of 2008, there were derivatives with a notional value, meaning that if you added up all the pieces of paper, were worth $700 trillion. In other words, if they all cashed out at once, you would need to have $700 trillion in cash, and of course there isn't that much money. So with all of these hedges and derivatives and puts and calls, those are all derivatives, and all these other things they do, all they cared about was making the minimum monthly payment on the credit card bill. In other words, to service the $700 trillion in notional value derivatives, they had to pay a certain amount of cash every month, and God forbid they should all come due. What's happening with all of these bailouts, which are now around 11 trillion if you add up all the U.S. bailouts, they're chasing a $700 trillion derivatives bubble down the drain. The people who have run the monetary paradigm, the economic paradigm, since money was first invented, have wanted to mystify it and to make everybody believe that only some expert could understand the mumbo-jumbo of the priesthood of money. 3 things only anybody needs to know about the way money works around the world today. 1, fiat currency. What is money? If I were to take a bill out of my wallet, and I reach in my wallet and I pull out this bill, it's $20. Wow. Okay. Can I eat it? Can I roll it up and chew it? Do I get calories and vitamins? No, I don't. Can I crumple it up, throw it in my gas tank? Is the car going to go anywhere? No, it's going to clog the fuel injectors, maybe. This is only a symbol. This doesn't mean anything. It's fiat. It's created out of thin air because somebody turned on a printing press. That's all it is. Before the great growth of population, which occurred with the advent of oil, came this revolution in the monetary system as well. There was a time when the pound sterling actually meant a pound of sterling silver. There was only so much silver out of the ground. It was tangible. You couldn't print silver. It was something real. You cannot print any more money than there is energy to back it up. That simple. So we have fiat currency. Then we have something called fractional reserve banking. If you were to bring me in a $10 deposit, I could make $90 worth of loans based on just having that $10 in my drawer, because it's all calculated on the premise that not everybody's going to come in and want their cash all at once. That's called a run on the bank. So they have calculated the odds, much as Vegas odds makers do, and said, okay, well, you know, very little odds under normal conditions. When I lend now a total of $100 based on that $10 deposit, that's more money that I create out of thin air. Well, gee, that means that in order to pay off, whoever gets that money has to make more money still to feed in at the bottom to pay the bank so that the bank can create still more money. You know, I think it's probably pretty safe at this point in time with the collapse of the U.S. economy to say that pretty much everybody is understanding how compound interest works. The higher the interest rate on your credit card, for those people who had, 20, 25% cards, that means they're creating that much more money if they don't pay cash every month. What I have just described is a pyramid scheme. We live in an infinite growth paradigm, which requires growth forever. It's not that Bernie Madoff was a pyramid scheme or Stanford was a pyramid scheme.